Hello and welcome to the Real Estate Podcast. This is the Parenting on Fridays edition, February the 21st, 2020. Today we're going to talk about freedom and mistakes in parenting. Stay tuned. Lately, I have found myself torn in too many directions, pulled to the left and the right, taking on too many projects, trying to balance things out, having projects that pile up on me around the house, just too many projects, too many things going on. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to find balance, mostly because it's not a good look for my children to see me sporadically moving all over the place, tossed and turned by every wind, every wave, every doctrine, everything that's pulling on us. But I need to be balanced so that they can see what balance looks like. And I need to be consistent in that so that they can live the same type of balance, regardless of what they do, knowing they probably won't do the same things I do, but they need to be balanced in what they do. So when we're talking about freedom and mistakes, yes, I have the freedom to take on and accept a lot of projects, but the problem is it's a mistake, especially when you can't do or finish or complete those projects the way you may have wanted to, or effectively, or with the type of work that you want to put forth. And it's really just something to do when you take on too much. So it's time for me to figure out how to be balanced so I can pass that along to my children and show them what balance really looks like. I have to live it before them. So I have the freedom to make a lot of choices, but I need to make the right choices or I will be making more mistakes. Same concept with parents towards their children. Some of the mistakes we make is we may hover too much over our children. We may watch out for every mistake they make. And if any of you have had children before, you know that when they're little babies and they're at that 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever age where they start trying to walk, and you see them get up and then you see them try and then they fall and then they get up and then they try and then they fall. It's the same concept in life. And if you do not allow that child to continue that process of trying, and you're always there to protect them from every single thing that comes along, and they never have to think through or figure out issues on their own. If they never practice that at a younger age, it's going to be more and more difficult for them to make it on their own. They're going to tend to rely on you or someone else. They're always going to lean on somebody to get things done, as opposed to actually using the gifts and the abilities and talents that God gave them and using their mind, just making common sense decisions based on the word, based on what you've taught them, just knowing that they can't get involved in this because this has too many caveats that come. You know, our kids are going to make mistakes just like we made mistakes, but we have to remember you have to allow them to make some of those mistakes. We have things like helicopter parents or tiger moms and people who are so intent on making their kids the greatest thing since sliced bread. But, you know, according to God, God already thinks they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. Our problem is we don't. And that's why we hover and protect and try. They can't become great unless we allow them to make those mistakes sometimes. Now, I'm not saying if it's a detrimental situation where they're getting ready to get injured or hurt or it's life-threatening. What I'm saying is some of the smaller things that we protect our kids from so much sometimes, that we are hovering over them with every circumstance, watching every move they make and giving them advice on everything. But what we tend to do is we tend to make them more lazy. We tend to make them more averse to trouble and persecution and problems and issues, which life is going to bring. Now, I said all this to say Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Philippians 2:14 says, do all things without grumbling or questioning. These These two things are mandatory as a parent. You have to train up your child in the way that they should go. You want them to know God. You want them to serve God. You want them to follow God. You want them to be able to talk and figure out what God is telling them to do so that they can find their way. You can guide them in that, but they eventually have to get that one-on-one relationship with God themselves. And you can't hinder that. You can't make that happen. The way you found God may be a little different than the way they may have found him. They're in a whole different lifestyle. You've changed the whole game with your process. So they have to find him on their own. And you need to allow them. And then do all things without grumbling or questioning. You know, they need to see that example of you following God, listening to God, and doing what he says. Ephesians 5:15-17 says, look carefully when you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time because the days are evil. So just like I said, with me and my time, if I don't balance it out, I'm not being a good representation of Christ or listening to Christ because I've taken on too many projects. I'm sure he didn't tell me to take on every project that I took on. So as I have the freedom to do that, I need to make good decisions so that I don't create a pattern of mistakes that my children can pattern after. I want them to pattern after the Lord that I serve, the ideals that my God has given me, and the love that I have for him and people. So if I do that, I know I can give them a quality understanding of how a relationship works. I hope you got something out of this today. Be blessed, grace, and peace.